name is Joe Foy. I'm co-executive director of the Wilderness Committee, and today I'm checking on beautiful wilderness areas and also the threats to wilderness. Things like this clear-cut logging and waste pile burning that I've come out in the field to document. The reason I'm talking to you today is I produced a video about the year's activities of our environmental group. The video looks at from about May of 2018 until April of 2019. It documents the work carried out from our offices in Vancouver, Victoria, Winnipeg, and Toronto. We had some wild times this past year. Enjoy the show. Every year we publish our annual report. It basically tells you what we've been up to for the past 12 months, the campaigns we've worked on, who we partnered with in the environmental movement in the communities, the various provinces we've worked on to protect wilderness and wildlife and to safeguard the climate. It's actually a lot of work, but it's also a ton of fun. Of course, we also have the numbers that go behind our wilderness preservation work, the hectares that we've been able to protect, the amount of endangered species that are in Canada, province by province, the number of staff, and of course, the dollars and cents. All in all, a fascinating read, which you can find on our website at wildernesscommittee.org. That's wildernesscommittee.org. In May of 2018, our Manitoba office got a team out to Nopiming Provincial Park to document mining exploration damage in the park. Our Vancouver office team launched a series of protests, rallies, and video projects aimed at stopping Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline and tanker expansion project.
So the first time I ever took the ferry from Victoria to Vancouver, we actually went past a pod of orcas that were swimming in the sea.
I was on the ferry and I didn't know Victoria because I haven't seen Algonquin territory of speaking people. So being on the dock, I was like, oh my God.
I had a reef out in front of me and I was noticing all the seals were jumping out of the water and jumping onto the reef and jumping onto the reef, and I was like, what the heck's going on? And then I saw the killer whale tails and fins all around them, and they were hunting the seals.
Wherever I am, if I'm traveling or if I'm back home in Alberta, every time that I come back to the coast, that's always my favorite memory, because it's this feeling of knowing where home is and knowing the place that you belong to and knowing what matters to you.
Stop Kinder Morgan!
This is Peter McCartney here, the climate campaigner for the Wilderness Committee. We've been outside of influential Liberal MPs' offices in the Lower Mainland all week this week, making some noise, making sure the community here knows that citizens of British Columbia don't want the government to put our taxpayer money behind the Kinder Morgan pipeline. If you didn't get a chance to make it out this week, I know lunchtime rallies in the week are tough, make sure to use our calling tool, give your MP a call and tell them that we do not want them to bail out Kinder Morgan. Thank you.
A team from our Manitoba office also launched a protest aimed at telling the federal government not to invest in Kinder Morgan's ill-fated Trans Mountain Pipeline project. A team from our Vancouver office attended a packed public meeting in opposition to draining a lake in the heart of popular Tetrahedron Park on BC's Sunshine Coast. And then our volunteer trail crew, led by Wilderness Committee staff, headed for southwestern Vancouver Island to build boardwalk trails in the endangered central Walburn Valley. In June of 2018, we headed up to near Kamloops, British Columbia, to check out reports that the Trans Mountain Pipeline had sprung a leak.
I'm here outside Darfield Pump Station, where a month ago, Kinder Morgan spilled 4,800 liters of crude oil into the environment. Now, they first reported the spill as 100 liters, and that may have had something to do with it being 3 days before the federal government bought their 60-year-old leaky pipeline for $4.5 billion of taxpayer money.
Our volunteer trail crew, led by Wilderness Committee staff members, headed to Vancouver Island, to the west coast, near the town of Tofino, where they helped construct boardwalks in the Tloquet Nation's tribal park on Mears Island. We joined with the Sierra Club to head up to the Schmidt Creek Valley on the northeast coast of Vancouver Island to check out reports of old-growth logging near the mouth of the Seneca River, where the killer whales come to beaches all along that part of the coast. Our Manitoba office produced a 4-page educational newspaper about how agricultural runoff is slowly killing some of Canada's greatest lakes. In July of 2018, we got disturbing news that logging had started in the Donut Hole, a 6,000 hectare area of unprotected forests and mountains in the heart of popular Manning and Skagit provincial parks. We headed up, we took photos and videos and sounded the alarm. Our volunteer trail crew headed back to Mears Island to build more boardwalk. We also headed over to the Walburn Valley on the southwest coast of Vancouver Island to attend the annual Walburn Convergence gathering to hang out with our allies and enjoy the beautiful forest there. Then we headed north to near Dawson Creek, BC in the beautiful Peace River Valley to attend the 13th annual Paddle for the Peace, so we could be with our friends and allies who were dealing with the terrible BC government decision to go ahead with the Site C Dam. In August of 2018, we headed into Ontario's Algonquin Provincial Park to collect photos and video clips of the logging that still occurs here.
Would you leave your gate unlocked at home? This is an access gate into the thousands of kilometers of logging road inside Algonquin Provincial Park. The Wilderness Committee has been working for years to end logging inside Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario. Not only is there logging going on inside a park, which shouldn't be happening, but they're not taking proper care of the park. Log on to our website, wildernesscommittee.org/Ontario, and learn how you can help end logging in Algonquin Provincial Park. I'm Eric Rader, on the ground for the Wilderness Committee.
We headed for Clearwater, British Columbia to check out reports of caribou habitat logging.
and Charlotte here with the Wilderness Committee. We got a tip that the provincial government has approved 2 more cut blocks in caribou critical habitat. The Canadian government has mapped all the critical habitat for caribou in BC. Regardless of this, the BC government continues to give logging permits for companies to go in and clear out their habitat. So Joe and I are up on our way to go check out these cut blocks and see if logging activity has started. We made it to the approved cut blocks. We weren't sure what we were going to find. As we approached, we saw trees falling down, so they're actually actively logging this site right now. And this is all critical habitat for the southern mountain caribou, the Wells Grey herd. In BC, we know that there are now 2 herds of caribou that are down to less than 5 individuals. And across the province, caribou numbers are declining. This is a state of emergency for caribou in BC, and the provincial government needs to immediately stop all logging activities and other destructive activities within caribou critical habitat that's been mapped by the Canadian government.
We headed over to British Columbia's Mount Robson Park to meet activist Catahouse Manuel and the Tiny House Warriors.
I'm standing here with other Secwepemc, our community, and I wanted to just, pass this on, but my name is Catahouse Manuel, Catahouse Befki. It means red woman, and I'm from the Secwepemc and the Kanaka Nation, and we're building tiny houses. We committed to building 10 tiny houses to put in the path of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, so this is one of them. And we moved from the man camp area today, but this one is going to be going out from here, after we're done here, because the threat is here in the north.
When the federal Liberal cabinet came to Nanaimo, British Columbia, we were there to meet them to voice our displeasure over their decision to move forward with the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
There's heavy security around the Vancouver Island Convention Centre as the country's most powerful politicians arrive to meet here. For the first time, a federal Liberal cabinet will gather in Nanaimo, and they're bound to get an earful.
This is continuing the tradition that we have here on the island of highlighting the deep, deep opposition to Trudeau's plans to push through Kinder Morgan.
Last time the Prime Minister made a public appearance in Nanaimo, he hosted a town hall. He heard from people with many concerns. Chief among them were people opposed to the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which is still top of mind for many on the West Coast.
And I think the days of him or his cabinet coming to Vancouver Island and not hearing that opposition are long gone.
We celebrated wildly at news that the Federal Court of Appeal had put a kink in Trans Mountain's pipeline plans. The courts ruled that the federal government had not properly consulted with First Nations over the Trans Mountain project. The Wilderness Committee's Manitoba office commissioned a poll which showed a solid majority of Manitobans support ending logging and mining in all provincial parks.
Eric Redder from Wilderness Committee. You can find out more about that organization and more about this poll we're going to talk about at wildernesscommittee.org. Hi, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So, a poll released today, and it says basically 70% of Manitobans want to see a phase-out of industrial activity in provincial parks. This is mining, this is lumber, all that stuff, logging. So talk a bit about this poll, please.
Yeah, we've been working to try and get our provincial parks protected for a lot of years, and we phased logging out of a lot of the parks, but we still have logging going on in Duck Mountain. And then just this spring, the government authorized a whole bunch of mineral exploration at bulldozed Nopiming Provincial Park. So we wanted to get a handle on just how people felt about this. For years, we've known the Manitobans wanted this stuff out of the park, and now we have, from Probe Research, real concrete data right across the board in rural Manitoba and in urban areas. 70% of the people say it's time to get rid of these antiquated legislation that allows this.
And then more good news to celebrate, thanks to the rising tide of public opinion against logging in the donut hole surrounded by Manning and Skagit Provincial Parks, the BC government put a temporary hold on approving any additional logging plans. Even the mayor of Seattle got involved in pushing for a hold on logging. But the current logging continued, and therefore so did our campaign to have all logging permanently banned in the donut hole. So I'm up in the Manning Park donut hole. It's BC Day, and I wanted to see how far logging road building has progressed here in the Manning Park donut hole at the end of the Smithram Creek logging road. And that's important because behind me is a beautiful alpine, well, semi-alpine, it's forested bowl below Silver Daisy Peak, and there's a little alpine, a little lake there, and a big proposed cut block, a BC Timber Sales cut block. In September of 2018, we conducted a bicycle climate solutions tour of some of the coolest projects in Metro Vancouver. We produced a 4-page educational newspaper about the need to strengthen Canada's endangered species legislation and back it up with firm action to stop the decline in numbers of species that's occurring right across the country. We kept hammering away on the logging in the donut hole, traveling back and forth, collecting photos, videos, and information, and producing videos and shows, all demanding that the provincial government halt the logging in the middle of Manning and Skagit provincial parks immediately. In October of 2018, more good news. The film Toad People, produced by the Wilderness Committee, won the prestigious Panda Award from Wildscreen. The film was produced to showcase the efforts of British Columbians to conserve endangered species in their own neighborhoods, and was distributed as a way of encouraging the provincial government to enact species at risk legislation.
See where the leaves are. See if we can find him. There he is.
The whole road was just covered with them. It was just masses of them. These thousands of toads just hopping across the road.
It was so many at one time there, they were just in motion. So just like a carpet moving.
And then Canada's climate commitments suffered a huge setback when a massive LNG project was given the green light by Canada's federal government.
Today's announcement by LNG Canada represents the single largest private sector investment in the history of Canada.
But not everyone is happy. Environmental activists worry the project brings with it increased carbon pollution.
This LNG facility will blow British Columbia's climate targets out of the water and essentially make liars out of all our leaders, both federal and provincial, who have said it is their goal to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions. In November of 2018, we headed up to British Columbia's South Okanagan's Nopiming country to take photos and video clips of the National Park Preserve proposal there. Vancouver Island office team joined up with the Sierra Club to head for northeast Vancouver Island to conduct a series of community conversations about the future of forestry and the preservation of old-growth forest on Vancouver Island. In Vancouver, we joined with Sierra Club to hold an educational evening on the processes of fracking and liquefied natural gas. And then it was time for the Wilderness Committee's annual open house and the giving out of the Eugene Rogers Environmental Award. This year, the award went to Reuben George and Eugene Kung for their outstanding efforts to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that the Wilderness Committee has decided to award you the Eugene Rogers Award this year, an honor that goes back decades, and to you and Reuben George on behalf of your work for the Tsleil-Waututh Sacred Trust Initiative. The Federal Court of Appeals win was a massive victory. It gives us this breathing time to kind of regroup and come back, and we're going to get this pipeline for good. So,
it is a huge honor. I know that a number of my heroes have won this award. Notably Grand Chief Stuart Phillip and many others. So I'm really glad and honored to have this recognition. I got to say it definitely was more than just the two of us. It's a huge movement of people, and the Wilderness Committee has been a huge part of it, and all your members. So I just want to thank you all for the recognition.
Well, I'm back here in the Manning Park Donut Hole. It's mid-November now. I'm back here because we got reports that logging has started in cut block SD 105. That's the cut block just below Silver Daisy Peak. It looks like they are working 7 days a week to drop trees in cut block SD 105. What a shame. What a shame for Manning and Skagit Parks. What a terrible shame that the logging is going on now. The Minister of Environment and the Minister of Forests can stop it before all the trees are down. It's very important to write your letters in now to them. Please stop the logging that's occurring right now in cut block SD 105, and please, to the ministers, do not allow for any further logging in Silver Daisy Valley or 26 Mile Valley. In December of 2018, the Wilderness Committee's Manitoba office was fighting off an onslaught of mining proposals in the province's provincial parklands.
The pace of mineral exploration in Manitoba is picking up. Companies are looking for lithium in northern Manitoba. Now, as we've been hearing, exploration deals are being signed in Manitoba. The deals would allow mining companies to look for lithium, and a lot of the land is also in Manitoba's provincial parks. The increase in these agreements is causing concern for the environmental community. To find out what those concerns are, we've reached Eric Rader. He's the campaign director with the Wilderness Committee. Right now, he's near Lac du Bonnet en route to take a look at some of the land that might be mined. Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Eric, why are you looking at the land there?
Well, any mineral exploration is going to have an impact. The development of mineral claims going out for drilling means bulldozing roads into wilderness, into the habitat of moose, and in some cases, habitat that's supposed to be set aside for endangered species like caribou. And of course, it's a lot of these new developments and mining claims that have been put in place by these corporations from outside of Manitoba are happening inside our provincial parks. And this big recent chunk of claims and quest for mineral exploration is happening inside Whiteshell Provincial Park. And that really comes as a shock to a lot of people because Whiteshell is one of our most beloved provincial parks.
In January of 2019, the Wilderness Committee produced a 4-page educational newspaper about the need to preserve the entire Skagit River watershed within British Columbia. The watershed contains the Donut Hole area, which is entirely surrounded by Manning and Skagit provincial parks, but it also contains very special unprotected watersheds, drainages, rivers, creeks, and forests as well. In February of 2019, we celebrated wildly when BC's Minister of Environment made the decision to protect Tetrahedron Provincial Park from an ill-conceived proposal to drain one of its lakes for a municipal water source. In March of 2019, our anti-fracking campaign got a big boost with the delivery of a 16,000 signature petition to the legislative buildings in Victoria. We produced a 4-page educational newspaper about the fabulous South Okanagan-Similkameen National Park Reserve proposal. And then more good news when the BC government passed anti-SLAPP legislation designed to prevent large corporations from suing citizens who speak out against their projects. And then in a shocking turn of events, a major mining company, Imperial Metals, applied for a 5-year permit to drill for gold in the donut hole surrounded by Manning and Skagit provincial parks at the very time we were fighting logging. Now mining was piling on, proving that wilderness needs all the friends it can get. In April of 2019, the Wilderness Committee's Manitoba office turned out for the Senate hearings in Winnipeg on Bill 69, a bill to strengthen the environmental assessment process on large industrial projects like oil pipelines. The Wilderness Committee was there to ensure the Senate did not weaken the proposed legislation. And then it was time to celebrate Earth Day, which in Winnipeg meant getting together for some good conversation, some hot soup, and some great music. Vancouver was celebrating Earth Day too.
Sustainably shrinking your carbon footprint and taking garbage out of waterways. These are some of the ideas being considered as April 22nd marks the 49th annual Earth Day. But are we doing enough in our part of the Earth to make it a greener place? Recent green initiatives like a bike share program show the city is rolling in the right direction.
Of not turning our eyes away from what has been lost, what is at risk of being lost, and there's so much of that. But it's also a time to come together and to celebrate this beautiful world that we live in and to talk about how much we want to pass that on.
Well, that's pretty much all for this year's annual report video. I leave you with these hopeful pictures of people marching in the streets of Vancouver on Earth Day in favor of a better, greener world for all. If you would like to join the Wilderness Committee, donate, come out to some of our trail building expeditions, participate in some of our rallies or protests, check us out on that website, wildernesscommittee.org. That's wildernesscommittee.org. Bye for now.